Yorma, this is ABC News, coming to you live from Ngunnawal country, and we also acknowledge other people and families with connection to the lands of the ACT. Tonight, cheers and a few tears as Denmark welcomes a new king and his Australian-born queen. Also tonight, several new party drugs detected by Canberra's pill testing service, but just how dangerous could they be? The shoppers shunning the major supermarkets in favour of local producers and smaller shops. And Aussie Alexi Poprin wins at Melbourne Park, setting up a tough match against reigning champion Novak Djokovic. Good evening, I'm James Glenday. It is always lovely to have your company. Now, some will see it as a fairy tale story. A young Australian woman who married a prince has today become a queen. Tens of thousands of people lined the streets of Copenhagen to watch Queen Margrethe II hand over the Danish throne to her son, King Frederik X, making his Tasmanian-born wife Queen Consort of Denmark. And just like the couple's wedding moment, it was sealed with a kiss. From Copenhagen, here's our Europe correspondent, Isabella Higgins.
It was meant to be just a simple ceremony, but the crowds arrived on a grand scale. The new king steps onto the balcony of Christiansborg Palace in central Copenhagen. Welcomed by a sea of red and white flags, he's moved to tears. The Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, proclaimed him King Frederik X with a 9-fold salute. In his first public address as monarch, he paid tribute to his mother and said he'd need the support of his Australian-born wife, Mary.
Today, the throne is passed on. My hope is to become a unifying king of tomorrow. It is a task I've approached all my life. It is a task I take on with pride, respect, and great joy.
Moments earlier, Queen Margrethe arrived at the palace, ending her more than 50-year rule on her terms. Signing the instrument of abdication and announcing God save the King. Frederik's much-loved wife Mary is the first Australian to become a reigning queen. The couple were joined briefly on the balcony by their 4 children, including the new heir, Crown Prince Christian. And a final raucous applause for a royal kiss. Among the sea of Danish flags, some cheering Australians.
Aussie, Aussie, Aussie! Oi, oi, oi!
So I'm not sure how far, but we travelled for about 24 hours.
I don't think there's many common Australians that will end up a future king or queen in any country around the world.
I think some people call that the Mary effect. I think it's because it's added a new dimension to the relationship. It's created a sense of admiration and affection between the people of Australia and Denmark.
The couple returning to their royal residence by horse-drawn carriage.
The King and Queen come to the throne with enormous popularity, and there's a great sense of excitement about what this new royal reign will look like.
I've got a champagne bottle and I'm just out here with some friends, just marking the King's Day, the celebration of the King and the royal family.
Fireworks ended a day of festivities celebrating King Frederik X and his Australian Queen.
And so what's next for the new king and his queen consort? A short time ago, Isabella Higgins sent this update from Copenhagen.
Well, Denmark is waking up to its first full day under the reign of King Frederick X, and things look a little different today at Christiansborg Palace. But there is still one more celebration on the agenda. The King and Queen are due back here for a formal reception with the country's lawmakers. This building actually houses the Danish Parliament. So inside later today, the Danish Prime Minister and the Speaker of the House will formally welcome the new monarch, of course, acknowledging them as the head of state, as the overseer of the country's constitution. But what else is on the agenda for the royal couple? We know they've got lots of interest, lots of causes in which they are hoping to champion in their new roles. We can expect to see some of that in the weeks and months ahead.
Isabella Higgins reporting there. Well, to other news now, and 3 new recreational drugs have been detected by Canberra's pill testing service, CanTest. The announcement follows a series of overdoses at music festivals in Victoria and renewed calls for wider access to drug testing.
These 3 bags of white powder are samples provided to Canberra's pill testing service, CanTest. The samples were thought to be MDMA, ketamine and Ritalin.
What we found was relatively similar compounds, but with a small structural difference.
Illicit drugs new to pill testing chemists as well as to the market.
We can't really say what these drugs would do to a person because we've never seen them before.
CanTest is the country's only permanent drug checking or pill testing site. The drug samples were assessed at its Canberra lab in June 2023. Just how widespread these or any other new drugs are can't be measured.
What we can do is give Canberrans and Territorians from the ACT a good idea of what's in their market. It's quite hard to extend that information to other jurisdictions.
There are renewed calls for pill testing to be made more widely available following a series of overdoses this month. Several people attending the Juicy Fest and Hard Mission musical festivals in Victoria were hospitalised after taking what's thought to be MDMA. Dr. Caldecott says data from the US shows a trend towards cheaper to produce imitations of illicit drugs like amphetamines, MDMA and ecstasy, a trend which appears to have arrived in Australia.
I think a lot of people who consume or purchase drugs are being sold a dud and potentially a dangerous dud.
The 3 samples analysed by CanTest were taken away by the clients. Whether they took the drugs and if so, what their effect was, remains unknown. James Fiver, ABC News, Canberra.
ACT police are investigating another alleged assault at Summernats earlier this month. A video on social media appears to show a driver being assaulted by a security guard after getting out of his car. The video does not show the events leading up to the violent confrontation. In a statement, police say they've been made aware of the incident and that no arrests have been made. Police are also continuing to investigate a separate alleged brawl involving dozens of people at the annual car festival, including some wearing pink crowd safety vests. The federal court has dismissed a high-stakes legal case against gas company Santos, allowing the construction of its $5.7 billion Barossa gas pipeline to continue. A group of Tiwi elders and traditional owners last year successfully sought to pause the project on cultural heritage grounds. However, the court today ruled there was negligible evidence of archaeological sites near the pipeline route.
A massive offshore gas project back on track to begin production next year. The underwater pipeline from the Barossa gas field in the Timor Sea to export facilities in Darwin set to go ahead after a lengthy legal battle. With the federal court ruling, a group of Tiwi elders had not produced enough evidence of significant songlines in the pipeline's vicinity. In her findings, Justice Natalie Charlesworth concluded the evidence asserting that songlines relate to or extend into the area of sea country through which the pipeline will pass is insufficient. The 263-kilometre pipeline will start about 7 kilometres west of the Tiwi Islands and run underwater to Darwin, where it will be shipped as LNG to buyers in South Korea and Japan. A group of Tiwi Island elders challenged the project, claiming it could damage significant underwater cultural sites. Today, that challenge was dismissed.
We are very excited today that another hurdle for Santos has been removed and they can get on with providing an energy source into the territory that is worth $6 billion to our economy.
Santos has welcomed the court's decision, while Australian Energy Producers has gone a step further, labelling the case against Santos as lawfare and calling for the removal of what they say are ambiguities in the offshore regulatory scheme. Meanwhile, the small group of Tiwi elders that brought the case say they are hurting from the loss, with the court ordering them to cover Santos's legal costs. Oliver Chaseling, ABC News.
Foreign Minister Penny Wong has departed for a high-stakes trip to the Middle East to advocate for a sustainable ceasefire in Israel and Gaza. The minister is flying to Jordan before heading to Israel, the West Bank and the United Arab Emirates. She'll meet survivors and families of Israeli hostages, but despite calls from the opposition, she hasn't committed to visiting the site of the October 7 attack. There are also calls from within the Albanese government to take a firmer stand on Israeli settler violence in the West Bank, including imposing sanctions. Australia's second largest port operator is calling on the federal government to intervene in an industrial dispute. The company, DP World, claims the dispute has cost the economy more than $1 billion amid growing shipment delays.
The next batch of fruit at this warehouse might not be so fresh. Joe Saina imports produce, which he says is now perishing in containers at docks across the country.
We've got fresh fruits and vegetables trying to arrive for the Chinese New Year in the first week of February, and they've been held up because of disputes at one of our major stevedores.
Australia's second largest port operator, DP World, is suffering from major disruptions at its port terminals in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Fremantle because of an industrial dispute with unions.
We've got duopolies and we've got some companies that have a lot of market power and they've been able to use that monopsony power to keep wages low.
The Maritime Union of Australia wants a 16% pay rise for more than 1,500 workers over 2 years. In a breakthrough for DP World, the union has halted bans on certain shipping lines, but is still going ahead with 2-hour pauses on work. The company says the stoppages have pushed delivery times of some essential items behind by at least 2 to 8 weeks, with a backlog of more than 50,000 containers sitting at Australian ports. Without releasing the economic modelling behind its claims, DP World says since October, the industrial action has cost the economy $1.34 billion.
This additional cost could be passed to the consumers and leading to higher inflation.
DP World wants the government to intervene.
There is a significant amount of industrial action ongoing that rolls over week after week, and that means that we cannot service all our customers.
Industrial Relations Minister Tony Burke will meet with DP World later this week in a push to get the company and the union to reach an agreement as soon as possible. Nassim Khadem, ABC News.
To the US election, and candidates vying for the Republican presidential nomination are making their final appeals to voters in the state of Iowa. The caucus there is the first big test in the race for the White House, and former President Donald Trump is tipped to hold a massive lead over his rivals. North America correspondent Jade McMillan reports from Iowa.
Temperatures below minus 25 degrees Celsius haven't deterred Donald Trump's supporters.
I'm here to see a great man, a man that makes our country the best.
It's a little chilly, but being from Iowa, it's kind of used to it.
The former president is widely expected to easily win the Iowa caucus, the first chance for Republicans to vote on who they want to contest November's presidential election.
Once you set foot in that caucus site, the entire world will be listening to you, and I believe that Iowa is going to speak loud and clear.
His main opponents, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley, are likely jostling for second.
We're going to keep on going anywhere and everywhere. We're going to go all the way until the last hour.
Neither candidate is showing any sign of dropping out of the race.
Our voters are very motivated. I think it's very hard to poll an Iowa caucus, period, which the 16 poll was not accurate predicted, but especially one in negative 20 degrees.
People in Iowa are used to the cold, but this is severe even by their standards. And the caucus rules require voters to show up in person on what will be a freezing night, meaning turnout could be affected. There's still plenty of vocal anti-Trump sentiment here.
I'm very afraid if he comes back into power. It leaves a lot of uncertainty for how the rest of us are going to fare in this country.
But the results in Iowa could fuel the idea that his campaign is unstoppable. Jade McMillan, ABC News, Indianola, Iowa.
Almost 4,000 people have been evacuated from a town in southwest Iceland after a nearby volcano erupted for the second time in less than a month. The eruption sent lava into a local community and set several buildings on fire.
Iceland has more than 30 active volcanoes, but images like this are rare. This is Grindavik, a fishing town in the country's southwest, under siege from lava.
It's a bit of a weird feeling to see a town being destroyed almost in slow motion at this point.
After a swarm of small earthquakes on Saturday, Grindavik's 3,800 residents evacuated. Just hours later, there was an eruption which opened large cracks in the ground and sent lava snaking towards the community.
Some houses has burned or be buried under the lava, and it's still going quite strong into the town, so we see that the potential damage will be quite much.
Grindavik was first evacuated last November after a series of earthquakes, but residents returned home just before Christmas. Authorities raced to build long defensive walls in case of an eruption, walls that kept the lava out at first.
But then around noon we had a new shock when a fissure opened within the town, and there is lava flowing up from that fissure. Already several houses have gone under lava, so it's a very serious situation.
The government will meet in the next 24 hours to discuss emergency housing for a population who won't be heading home anytime soon. Mazoe Ford, ABC News.
Back home, and it's hoped new homes in Canberra will be cheaper and easier to heat and cool, and will be more accessible for residents with disabilities as changes to building regulations take effect. The ACT is the first jurisdiction to implement the updated National Construction Code in full. New residential builds will be required to have a 7-star equivalent energy rating, improved condensation management, compatibility with renewable technologies like solar panels or electric car chargers, and so-called livable housing design standards like a step-free entrance. The government says the rules are important.
We know that homes that are built today will be standing for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and so we need to ensure that they will be fit for purpose, they'll be comfortable for people, that they will be responding to our changing climate and weather extremes.
Long before a proposed inquiry into allegations of price gouging by the major supermarkets was on the cards, the shift towards alternatives was gaining some traction here in Canberra. As the prices charged by Coles and Woolworths come under the microscope, advocates claim the movement to move away from supermarkets is booming.
Alison White has been carting her trolley through Canberra's farmers markets for nearly 2 decades.
We love the atmosphere, we love the food, we love the fact that we actually buy the food directly from the farmers who grow the food. And how's the rain? Are you getting lots of rain at the moment?
It's more important to her now than ever.
At the supermarkets, the prices have climbed quite dramatically in recent years. The farmers market prices are actually quite stable.
A review is underway into how supermarkets do business with their suppliers after Coles and Woolworths posted billion-dollar profits last year.
I think what's happening now is going to make people more and more aware of where their food's coming from and where their money is going to.
These days, stone fruit grower Helen Ricketts no longer sells much to the big players.
The problem we've found with it is that we're price takers, not price makers there. Like, we don't know how much money we're going to get for the fruit when it leaves our place.
Around a quarter of her revenue was getting chewed up by middlemen.
By the time we pay for our packaging, our freight, the Agents Commission, and we get a lot less for the fruits.
They have so much more control over what they sell, the quality of their food, and then prices as well.
Hey Liz, hello, Happy New Year.
Across town, it's pickup day at Louise's Garage, a hub that divides deliveries of fruit, veg, bread and pantry items from Australian suppliers.
The produce can be up to about 30% cheaper than shopping at a supermarket.
Each week, users order what they want on an app.
It's cheaper for the consumer, it benefits the Australian farmers, it's better for the environment.
Her hub is at peak demand as more people tune into a movement to one supermarket they're shopping.
There's very, very little that I actually get from the supermarkets now. I think I went once over the whole Christmas break.
Buying food is obviously an essential, but now there's more choice than ever in how we source that food. Whether it's the farmer's market, your local co-op, or even getting into the veggie patch, shoppers are putting the big supermarkets on notice.
You're actually getting better quality produce for less money and directly to the people who grow it.
Jade Toomey, ABC News, Canberra.
Turning to finance now, and despite a sharp rise in the number of vacancies advertised over the past few years, it is still harder to find work. Here's David Chow.
Despite a big slowdown in consumer spending, the jobs market is still holding up surprisingly well. The number of jobs being advertised right now is about 36% higher than it was 4 years ago, when COVID didn't even exist. But it's getting a little bit harder to find work, according to analysis from ANZ and Indeed. The number of job ads has dropped 15% over the past year, as the red line shows. Now, this data from Seek also tells a similar story. Manufacturing, hospitality and retail are some of the industries with the most advertised opportunities. But still, the number of job ads in those industries has fallen sharply, like IT and communication, which is down 32% in the past year. Based on this, we can expect the unemployment rate to rise in the coming months. Meanwhile, it was a quiet day for the All Ords, which barely moved. Santos's shares, meanwhile, jumped after it won a federal court case against Tiwi elders who were trying to stop Santos from laying a pipeline near their islands off northern Australia. But the best performers were uranium stocks like Boss Energy and Paladin Energy. It's because the price of uranium surged to its highest levels since 2007. And what helped is that more than 20 countries like the US and UK declaring last month they would triple their nuclear energy capacity by the year 2050. Overseas, Japan's stock market hit a fresh 34-year high. And there were big rises for oil and gold, while iron ore prices fell sharply. And finally, the Aussie dollar is buying just under 67 US cents. And that's finance.
To sport now, and in tennis, Aussie Alexei Popyrin has set up a second-round Australian Open clash against the defending champion Novak Djokovic. Popyrin's straight sets win over countryman Mark Polmans came on a day of mixed fortunes for local hopes and some shaky moments for the tournament's top seeds.
A storm is brewing at Melbourne Park.
She's done it!
A world number one in doubles, Storm Hunter had never won an Australian Open match as a singles player. Now she's through to the second round.
It's a dream come true. I've been kind of waiting for it for a few years.
Alexei Popyrin has also progressed after outclassing compatriot Mark Polmans in straight sets. His next opponent, Novak Djokovic.
I last played him when I was 19. I've improved since then.
Daria Saville has been knocked out after losing to Poland's Magdalena Frech in a three-set battle. 6'6" Russian Daniil Medvedev made the most of his long limbs. After losing the opening set, Medvedev won the next two before his opponent Terence Atman was forced to retire hurt.
That might be it.
There was also an early scare for last year's men's finalist.
Now is my time.
Lowly ranked Belgian Zizou Bergs stunned 7th seed Stefanos Tsitsipas in the opening set. The Greek star had to reach into his bag of tricks to get back on track.
Oh, has he made it? Is it legit?
I've seen it, but I do not believe it.
Tsitsipas rallying to win in 4. No such luck for reigning Wimbledon champion Marketa Vondrousova, who was blown away in straight sets by Ukrainian qualifier Diana Yastremska.
Emphatic victory.
for the qualifier.
So much for no late night starts. It was almost midnight when defending champion Arina Sabalenka walked out onto Rod Laver Arena. But for the crowd that stayed, the match only lasted 53 minutes. It was a contrasting Grand Slam debut for Dino Prismic. Half the age of Djokovic, Prismic pushed the 10-time champion in 4 grueling sets.
For an 18-year-old, he played so maturely and so confidently on the court.
Tom Maddox, ABC News, Melbourne Park.
In cricket, Australia all-rounder Cameron Green admits he thought he was a 95% chance of opening the batting on his return to the Test side before learning Steve Smith would take the role. Instead, Green will slot in at number 4 for the first Test against the West Indies in Adelaide starting on Wednesday, and he says he couldn't be happier.
The debate surrounding who would open dominated headlines and divided opinions for days. And Cameron Green was convinced he'd be tasked with the role.
Yeah, I thought I was about 95% chance of opening, so that's where my head went for a couple of weeks, and yeah, grateful to be at 4.
Green will return in the position he feels most comfortable in, having been away from the Test side since being squeezed out during the Ashes.
It had been a whirlwind couple of years, and hadn't really had a chance to sit down and think about my own game and where it can go from here. So yeah, there's always a silver lining with not being in the team and having a bit of time in the nets to kind of work on my own game.
The West Indies offered little resistance in last summer's 2 tests against Australia and have brought an inexperienced squad on this tour. But they insist expectations are high.
Oh, we expect to come in and give them a challenge. We're here to win 2 test matches. We're not just here to play. So we're going to come out here and give it our best.
While this summer's Adelaide Test brings the same opponent, there's a switch from last summer's day-nighter back to the daytime and from December to January. But for the ground staff, the goal is the same.
How do we get a contest between bat and ball and provide a surface for the players to go and hopefully shine on it?
All eyes will be on Smith as one of Australia's most successful Test batters takes on a new role. Blake Kagi, ABC News.
To the weather now, and we have 2 viewer pictures tonight capturing the main weather-related story of the past few days. Roseanne Linford snapped the Lake Tuggeranong overflow, and although we often focus on the big picture, like the flooded creeks after a storm, Paul Bainton captured individual fat raindrops landing. He used a high shutter speed to do that as those drops fell on his pavers. Thank you, Paul and Roseanne. Now, it was a lot cooler today. After a low of about 13 at the airport, we got to just 21 at both the airport and Tuggeranong. As forecast last night, we received about 20 millimetres from the early hours of this morning, which made things feel just that little more humid today. There were also some showers about the region today and some mist around the Southern Highlands. Goulburn got to a top of just 16 degrees and had 14 millimetres of rainfall. About 16 millimetres fell at Nowra. The top at Thredbo Top Station was just 9.5 degrees. Around the nation, it is very hot inland. 41 degrees today at Alice Springs. There were some showers in Brisbane. It reached just 29. Sydney got to 24 and was a bit wet at times too. Melbourne reached 30. On the satellite, well, there's a lot going on at the moment. There are thunderstorms associated with the monsoon trough across the north and a moist onshore flow, which is helping to generate quite a lot of low-level cloud along a lot of the eastern coast. On the synoptic, the main thing for us is that high-pressure system, which is pushing easterly breezes and a lot of humid air across our region, which is going to help trigger more of the same unsettled weather. And tomorrow, some showers are again possible in Brisbane and in Sydney. Melbourne, though, is headed for about 30 degrees. In our region, the heaviest falls should be to the north of us tomorrow, with the chance of showers here increasing from the middle of the day, the early afternoon. On the south coast, temperatures are likely to peak in the mid-20s, about 24 degrees expected at Batemans Bay and Merimbula, 14 forecast for Thredbo Top Station and 27 for Yass. Here in Canberra and Queanbeyan, after a low of around 13 or 14 degrees again, we should get to about 20 23 in the mid-afternoon, with maybe up to 4 millimetres of rain expected. Sunrise is 6 o'clock on the dot and sunset is 25 minutes past 8. And looking ahead, more summery weather is coming, don't fret, but only after a few more days of rain. 24 is expected on Wednesday. There might be a storm or two around as well. 27 on Thursday, 28 on Friday and 29 degrees is forecast for Saturday. And that is the latest from the Canberra newsroom for this Monday evening. I'm James Glenday. It is always lovely to be with you. Stay with us now for 7:30 with Laura Tingle. And until tomorrow, Yarra, good night.